Welcome back. So if you're looking for documentation with unit testing, go and check out this link right here. You can also go to .NET own page and find the documents and then go under unit testing and unit testing best practices. They have one for XUnit and Unit MMS test, so you have some examples down here. The best practices is kind of covering everything, but they're actually using XUnit in here in the example. So I feel it's a pretty good guide right here. You can go and read it. There's a lot of great information, and also they have some best practices in the bottom. Go and check them out. You might see some things I've been missing. Put them into your code instead if you want to. Maybe get back to me if you feel there's something I've done that's completely wrong. It's okay, just write it in the comment and I'll explain why I did what I did, right? So that's that. You can go and check that out if you want to. But for now, let's jump back to my code. I want to just dive into a new test I built called create location with name less than 2 characters throws argument out of range exception. In this one, I actually used the built-in error right here, the argument out of range exception from C#'s default language. I didn't make a new exception. Again, you can go and do that if you want to. And then I kind of explained that it should end up sending a message like this called name must be 2 or more characters right here. That's kind of what it ended up creating. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a new location. All I'm setting is the name for now, and then I'm actually going to put in the location setup right here that we did so many times. Don't worry, we'll start creating helpers soon to get this or make this easier and start making validators to make it even simpler to work with this testing right here, so it's faster for you to do your unit tests. Good. And then we end up just throwing this exception, and then the name should be this. Let's try and see if it works right here. Of course, I should have a failing test. And of course, if you haven't played with unit testing that much yet, again, remember the flow. The flow is that you start out by making a unit test that fails. And when the unit test fails, like it's doing right now, the second step is that I go and I create code, production code, so that it runs. So let's dump into the service right here. My service that kind of takes care of this information. There we go. And now notice there's no way where it checks now if the name length is something specific. In my case, I wanted the test to kind of prove that if I put in a location with the name length that's less than 2 characters, it should throw new. Again, go and read the unit test, and you can see this argument out of range exception. Argument out of range exception, and then you should put in this message right here, right? So again, I am very specific right here with what I'm actually wanting in my test. Let's try and go back to unit test and just run this again, and let's see if everything's green now. There we go, it's green, and let's just look at the test again. Again, look at the code. Explain that if location name is length is less than 2, I should throw an argument out of range exception with this message right here. Let's try and go back to the unit test and just have a look at what it actually said down in the text. Create a location with name less than 2 characters, throws argument exception out of range exception, sorry. And then here's the location I'm creating. Here is the service I'm creating. Here I'm using the service. And then yes, I am getting this exception back. So I just created a unit test right here. Now notice one thing that we're going to change in the next lesson. My location service starts having a lot of information in here for the create. Maybe we could make some kind of validator that we could reuse. For instance, when we do update, we might get some similar issues. Maybe also for delete or something. Maybe other classes might be able to kind of check out locations if they're okay. So next lesson, we're going to make a validator and test that validator and get rid of all this code right here to make it easier to kind of read our location code. That's what we're going to try and play around with in the next lesson. So that was just another test. Now you know both how you can test if things are null, if things are empty, and also for different property information. Now let's try and clean up our code a little bit. Because as I said, for test-driven development, you have 3 steps again. Let's try and check them out. Step 1, figure out, have a failing unit test. That was what we did in the first part of this lesson right here. Step 2, go and make production code so the test doesn't fail anymore. That was what we did in the second part. Now step 3 is what we're going to do in the next lesson, and that is kind of refactor your code to make it simpler to read and simpler to reuse, right? So that's what we're going to do in the next lesson before we write a new failing test. See you next time. Have fun.